Okay, 7 o'clock, 7:01. We're late. Good evening. Glad that you're here tonight. I say that every Wednesday night, but come on. Really glad that you're here tonight.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Wednesdays are long days, and thanks for showing up. Thanks for joining us online. I know a lot of people watch online too. I appreciate that. We've just been having a conversation here before class that doesn't really look like David. I think it looks exactly like David. Anyway.
Just doesn't look ruddy.
Not ruddy enough. Okay. Maybe not. Maybe not. Every week I start with some kind of a little warm-up thing. Tonight I've got a short warm-up for us to kind of lead us into what we're going to be talking about. I want to start with a few riddles. And I'm going to preface that by saying I hate riddles. Okay? I hate them. Unless I'm the one who's asking them. Because when somebody proposes a riddle to you, it just makes me feel so dumb, you know? And they say, how can you not figure that out? And then they say it like, see, it's so easy. I've got a couple here, and if we don't get them, that's fine, because to tell you the truth, I wouldn't have got them either if I hadn't pulled them offline and I didn't know the answer. But here you go. Don't shout it out. A man claims he can take a ping pong ball, throw it a short distance, and the ball will stop itself and reverse direction back to him. He also claims he won't bounce the ball off any surface. How does he do it? Anybody know besides Mike? Mike? Dave? Anyone else? How does he do it, Mike? He throws it straight up. Stops and reverses direction. Okay. See how easy that is? How did you all not get that? That's why I hate riddles. No, it doesn't have to touch the ceiling. It'll stop on its own. Here's the next one. This is kind of a classic one. In a Major League Baseball game, a pitcher faces 27 batters. He strikes out all 27 batters. He gives up no runs, no hits, no walks, no pass balls, and yet his team loses 4-0. How is that possible? How many people know the answer to that? Mike, Jim, Mark. What is it, Jim?
They went into extra innings. They lost 4-0. It just says
the other team did the same thing.
the team loses the game.
That's not the answer, but I think you might. That might actually be a. That's the answer that Google has. If the game ends in 9 innings, but you're right. You're right. That could be an answer. The classic answer is he's a relief pitcher. He came in. The team was behind 4-0 with nobody out, and he strikes out 27 straight. So he would not get the loss. You're right. Very good. Harvey Haddix, the Pittsburgh Pirates, once pitched a 12-inning perfect game and lost. Lost a 12-inning perfect game. Harvey Haddix. Harvey Haddix. That's right. A traveler comes to a fork in the road which leads to 2 villages. In one village, the people always tell lies. In the other village, the people always tell the truth. The traveler needs to conduct business in the village where everyone tells the truth. A man from one of the villages is standing in the middle of the fork, but there's no indication as to which village he's from. The traveler approaches the man and asks him one question. From the villager's answer, he knows which road to follow. What question did he ask? This is a hard one. One question. Dave.
I think it's something like, does the other guy tell the truth or does the other guy lie or something?
Does the other guy tell but then he wouldn't know which, that would take 2 questions, wouldn't it? Because he still wouldn't have a clue.
Are you standing in the middle of a fork in the road?
Okay, that's not the answer. That wouldn't help him get to Mike.
Does he ask him the name of the city?
Huh?
Does he ask him the name of the village?
No. I wouldn't have got this one either, by the way. The one question is, which road leads to your village? If the guy that always lies says, this one leads to mine, he would know it's the other one. If the guy that always tells the truth says, this one leads to mine, he would know it's the other one. So, but the guide knows which village is which. The traveler doesn't. I know, that's the problem with riddles, right? There's always a but. That doesn't make sense to me. I know, it's hurting my head too, isn't it? I know. Okay, this is another one. I got one more. This is the last one. And I hate this one. A man is found lying dead, face down in the middle of the desert. He's wearing a backpack and appears to have been dead for weeks, yet no one has attempted to cross the desert in months. What happened? Anyone? Mike and Dave, you guys are riddle masters. Go ahead, Mike.
Parachute.
It's a parachute. See, here's the problem with that. It doesn't say parachute, it says backpack. And if you take it, it's a backpack, that's not going to help him. But yeah, it's a parachute.
Maybe that's why. Maybe that's what happened. He didn't have a parachute.
He's put a backpack on. Okay, see how much fun that was? Are we having fun tonight? Last week, we looked at God's will in our lives in the context of David's opportunity. We're going to come back to those riddles, by the way. It's going to make so much sense. In the context of David's opportunity to kill Saul again. David had an opportunity in the cave, and again, he had an opportunity when he and Abishai snuck into Saul's camp, and Saul was fast asleep. How easy it is, and how dangerous it can be for us to assume that we know what's best. I want to spend a little bit of class tonight talking about some application kind of stuff, and then we'll jump back into the story. The story's getting good. It's been good, but it's getting very interesting. But I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some application stuff. But let's get caught up first. If you remember, Abishai and David sneak into Saul's camp, and Abishai says, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of my spear. I won't strike him twice." Saul is lying in the middle of the camp, sound asleep. Joab is beside him, his general, his bodyguard. 3,000 soldiers are sound asleep around Saul as well. Abishai says, "Let me pin him to the ground. I won't strike him twice." Abishai is begging David, "Let me kill King Saul, the king of Israel." But David said to Abishai, "Don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "the Lord himself will strike him. Either his time will come and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now, get the spear and water jug that are near his head, and let's go." That's where we left off last week. David says, "We are not going to kill the Lord's anointed, but grab that spear, grab that water jug, and let's get back out of here." So David took the spear and water jug near Saul's head, and they left. No one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. Okay, here's a question for you. In the cave, Saul walks in, and David and his men are already in the cave, kind of hiding, and David sneaks up and cuts off a corner of Saul's robe. And the text says that David was conscience-stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. David felt terrible about doing that. We talked about that. David felt like I shouldn't have shown him up that way. What's the difference between cutting off a corner of his robe or taking the jug and taking his spear? And we're going to see in a minute, he kind of taunts Saul and Joab. Hey, look what I got. You guys, you weren't paying attention. What's the difference between I feel so bad about cutting off the corner of your robe, but I don't, because it seems like David's kind of showing them up here too. What do you think, Joyce?
Isn't that like a sign of royalty, the robe?
I mean, that might have something to it. There might be something about it. Yeah. Dave, and then...
After he told Saul what he did, Saul tried to kill him. After he cut the robe, Saul tried to kill him again. So this is later,
Okay.
and last time I tried to make nice.
And maybe that's it. After he cuts the robe, first Saul says, "Oh, yeah, I'll never, you're a better man than me." But then he immediately tries to kill him again. What do you think?
He gave it back.
What's that?
He gave it back. He told him, send somebody, and he gave it back to him.
Well, he ends up giving back the spear and the...
So he didn't keep it.
Okay, he didn't keep that. You're right.
And maybe all along he knew he wasn't.
Maybe all along he knew. I don't know the answer to the question. It just seems he was so conscience stricken. He felt so bad about kind of showing Saul up, and then he does it again. What do you think, Renee? He seems to do it again.
I'm going to make a sexist statement.
Go ahead.
Men are very competitive, and even though he wanted to have the heart of God, it was just, and he didn't kill the former king, but that I got you.
Okay.
And so I think that I've always thought when I read it that that's what it was about. He wanted to do what was right, but that warrior in him wanted a moral victory even though he didn't have a fleshly victory.
Okay. I like that. What do you think, Teresa?
I always thought, and I'm not sure if it says this in a little bit, but I always thought that he was more mad at the men because they let him get that far to Saul. So he didn't feel bad about it because he was making fun of them.
Okay. Mark?
When he cut off a piece of the robe, not only did David know that happened, but everyone who saw King Saul in his robe would also know that that happened.
Okay. That was a pretty public thing.
Yeah.
It turned out to be a public thing. Yeah. Again, I don't know the answer. I think maybe, here's my thought. I think when David's in the cave and the guys are telling him, this is your chance, this is God's will, this is your chance, kill Saul, take care of your problems, I think David came pretty close to killing him. I think David wrestled with that. Oh man, this is a chance. And I think he talked himself out of it. Here in the camp, I don't think David ever went in with the intention of, we're going to sneak in and kill Saul. I don't think that was ever his intention. And I might be completely off base on that. But I think maybe David was so conscience stricken because he knew I came pretty close to doing the wrong thing there. He's not conscience stricken the second time because I don't think he was wrestling with himself. Mike doesn't agree, and I might be wrong, but that's my thought on it. It just seems kind of weird to me that he feels so bad about it once, and he's kind of bragging about it the second time. But here's where we're going for a few minutes at least. We're going to talk a little bit about assumptions. David didn't make the mistake of trusting his assumptions more than he trusted God. Abishai does. Abishai assumed this is our chance. This is your chance. I mentioned last week, Abishai's like, hey, you said you couldn't kill the Lord's anointed, but I never said that. Let me do it. The older we get, many of us stop believing and start assuming. Think about that statement for just a second. I look around this class, and everybody in this class has been in the kingdom for a long time. We've got a lot of years in the kingdom in this class. I saw a study that, I won't quote it exactly, but basically it said Christian, people who have grown up going to church, Christians, kind of across Christendom, people who have grown up going to church assume that by the age of about 16, they know pretty much everything there is to know about the Bible and God's will in their life. And once they're older than 16, they don't really look for more truth. They just look for things to confirm their position or their beliefs. They seldom search for deeper understanding past age 16. I don't know if that's true or not. But I do think there is some truth to the fact that sometimes we spend more time trying to confirm our position than maybe searching for new truth. We kind of do fall back on our assumptions, which is a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing to stop believing and start assuming. Throw your hand up or something. Jim.
I'm not sure how this relates, or even if it does relate to the story with David, but it got me to thinking that the older we get, life's experiences make us start assuming things about other people well, I know what they're thinking. I know what, and the reality is people are a lot more complicated than that. I run across this at work a lot where people are, oh, this is what they're trying to do. And they may be right, sometimes, but we have to be careful because sometimes our assumptions, we think we know what the other person, their motives or what they were thinking or, what they're trying to accomplish, and we may be totally off base. Now, I've seen it in the, among Christians too.
I agree with that. As David gets older, he starts doing a little more assuming too. He got some issues coming up in his life. What do you think, Linda?
I think it's wrong to assume anything, like when talking to people about God. And I was talking to a man last week, and he was telling me how he was brought up and things that they did in his church. And I was like, let's look at the Bible. Okay, let's not say what was done to you when you were a baby, and now you're 72. And I said, we can't assume anything to this man. I said, what I would like to do is sit down and let's go by what God's words say, because that's what God's going to hold us to, not what you was taught when you were a little baby or as you grew up. I said, you got to read the Bible and go from there. Because I told him I was something else before I became a Christian too, but once I was taught the truth, I said, I'm going to follow God. And I just, in my mind, I can't think that to assume anything. I got to go by what God's words say, stand on it, and believe and teach that.
I like that. Yeah. Here's another statement that I'm going to make. The older we get, our memory overtakes our imagination. And we stop dreaming of what we can do or what we can be, and we begin to make assumptions. I think for a lot of people, our memory overtakes our imagination. Before we know it, we kind of lose our sense of adventure. And I'm not just talking about, in our spiritual lives. I think across the board. I think of things, my dreams when I was a younger man were a much different set of dreams now that I'm an older man. And I don't know. David trusted in God. Never assumed that David, knew better than God. He always seemed to understand that God was God. David wasn't. And you think of the assumptions that we make all the time in our professional lives. Well, this is as good a job as I will ever have. This is, the most fulfilling thing I'll ever be able to do. This is kind of it. We make assumptions in our marriages. Well, this is kind of where we are. Might as well be used to it. It's never going to be any different. This is kind of it. Our spiritual lives. I'm never going to be the man or the woman that I always sort of envisioned myself being spiritually. So I'll, kind of stay in my lane. I think we make assumptions in church. This is who we are. This is what we are. We'll never be anything more. This is kind of it. It's dangerous. What do you think, Orlando?
Yeah, on that end, it's a good correlation of what you're talking about, because one of the things that I pray for, like even right now, is I pray for that opportunity to be able to study with people and have that opportunity. It seems like it dwindles and it goes away, and it's slowly but surely my circle of influence doesn't seem to be as great as it was. And one of the things that I pray that God keeps alive within me is always that willingness to study with someone, to be able to push forward with someone and have them see all the possibilities that God has in their life. And I hope to never lose that. I want that. I want people in my influence that I can do that with. And that is one of my prayers. So I try to look for those opportunities, even when they seem like they may be impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'm using the wrong word. Maybe I should be using rationalization instead of assumption. We kind of rationalize, well, I'm in a different place in my life now. I don't have those kind of opportunities anymore. Well, am I praying for those opportunities? Am I praying for more? Do I feel like I'm meant for more? Or is this it? Abishai made the assumption Saul's time is up. But David's life continues on this grand adventure. And he refused to reduce God to the size of his biggest problem. Here's what I mean by that. Give me 5 minutes to chase a rabbit here. Most people will reduce God to the size of their biggest problem. I read that. That's not original with me. I read that. And I thought about it for a long time. And I didn't agree with it at first. But I agree with it more now than I did the first time I read it. Or we reduce God to the size of our greatest fear or our worst sin. Our biggest problem is that we don't think God's bigger than our biggest problem. You got to sit with that for a while. But I think it's true. I think we sometimes kind of keep God, well, you're no bigger than my biggest problem. You think of your biggest problem that you're going through right now, your biggest challenge right now. How does your view of God compare to that problem? Because David's view of God, especially when we read the Psalms, isn't just head knowledge. It changed his life. And when I say it changed his life, it changed how he lived his life. It changed how he approached life. He says a couple times, God's going to take care of Saul. It's not up to me to take care of Saul. God's going to take care of Saul. We all know Isaiah 55, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. I want to read you something that I had in my file, talking about how big is the God that we serve? How capable is the God that we follow? Consider this. I got to read it because I won't remember these numbers. Light travels at the speed of 186,000 miles per second. In the time it takes you to snap your fingers, light circumnavigates the globe about a half dozen times. That is faster than fast. Here's perspective. Our sun is 93 million miles away. If you were to drive a car 65 miles an hour for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, no pit stops, no rest stops, no gas stops, it would take over 163 years to drive a car from the earth to the sun. But the light that we see and the warmth that we feel is about 8 minutes old because light travels that fast. The sun is the nearest star in our tiny little galaxy called the Milky Way. But astrophysicists have discovered galaxies at least 13.7 billion light years away. 1 light year is equivalent to 5.88 trillion miles. So the farthest galaxy that's been discovered so far is 13.7 billion times 5.88 trillion, which means that God created galaxies about 80 sextillion miles away from us. It is a distance that is virtually incomprehensible. So, here's the so what. Our best thoughts on our best days are about 13.7 billion light years short of how good God really is. We underestimate God by 13.7 billion light years. He's 13.7 billion light years beyond our wildest imaginations, while we live in our tiny cage of assumptions. So think about that when you think about these verses that we know so well. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. What's everything? Well, we are 13.7 billion light years short of knowing what God can do through us. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine according to the power that's worked within us. What's he able to do? 13.7 billion light years more than we think. What shall he say in response to this? If God is for us, who can be against us? Everything is possible for him who believes. I think we are all guilty of grossly underestimating how good God is, how powerful God is, and how involved God wants to be in our lives. You see David growing in this. You also see David taking some steps in the wrong direction, this as well. So Let's jump back into the story. That was my rabbit hole, I guess. But 1 Samuel 26. David has just snuck back out of camp, Saul's camp. Then David crossed over to the other side and stood on top of the hill some distance away. There was a wide space between them. He called out to the army and said to Abner, son of Ner, aren't you going to answer me, Abner? Remember, Abner he's a violent man. Abner replied, who are you who calls to the king? David said, you're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard your lord the king? Someone came to destroy your lord the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men deserve to die because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where are the king's spear and water jug that were near his head? Now Saul gets involved in the conversation. Saul recognized David's voice and said, is that your voice, David, my son? David replied, yes, it is, my lord the king. And he added, why is the Lord pursuing his servant? What have I done, and what wrong am I guilty of? Now, let the Lord the king listen to his servant's words. If the Lord has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. If, however, men have done it, may they be cursed before the Lord. They have now driven me from my share in the Lord's inheritance and have said, go serve other gods. Now, do not let my blood fall on the ground far from the presence of the Lord. The king of Israel has come out to look for a flea, as one hunts a partridge in the mountains. Verse 21, then Saul said, I have sinned. Come back, David, my son, because you considered my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. Surely I have acted like a fool and have greatly erred. Here is the king's spear, David answered. Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord delivered you into my hands today, but I would not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. As surely as I valued your life today, so may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all trouble. Then Saul said to David, may you be blessed, my son David. You will do great things and surely triumph. So David went on his way, and Saul returned home. And again, they all lived happily ever after. Because David finally is convinced that Saul is no longer pursuing him, and Saul has turned to see the light. David can now rest easy, knowing that Saul is no longer a threat in his life. And if you believe that, look at the very next verse. But David thought to himself, one of these days I will be destroyed by the hand of Saul. Saul again says, hey, may you be blessed, my son David. David's response, one of these days I'll be destroyed by the hand of Saul. And then David comes to a conclusion. He makes a decision. The best thing I can do is to escape to the land of the Philistines. Now Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand. Sooner or later, Saul's going to kill me. The best thing I can do is slip away to the land of the Philistines. Remember, David's been to Gath already. He's been to the land of the Philistines, running from Saul. He had to act crazy just to survive, just to get out of there. How would you describe David's mindset? And what would you say about his decision to say, where can I go? What can I do? I'll go to the Philistines. What's going on in David's mind, and is this a brilliant decision or is this a crazy decision? How would you describe his state right now? Orlando.
To me, this reminds me of those heist movies where they're trying to hide something, and they're like, let's just hide it in the police inventory because they'll never look there. That's kind of what David's doing, and he's not wrong for thinking what he's thinking, because he knows the character of Saul, first of all, and you know, proof has been in the pudding. Okay. Saul has said these things, and he has gone back on his word. And, you know, I was out in the hallway when you asked that first question about what was David thinking when he took the jug and the spear. I thought it was a gentle warning to Saul that, I could have, but I didn't. And anybody that was in that position should have seen that as an opportunity to maybe change. But these are all of the things that I see that, basically Saul gave his heart over to be cold. And God allowed Saul to continue to be that way. That way, when David finally does come into his kingship, that there was great reason to have put David there.
Okay. That's a good point. Yeah. Jim?
Well, at first glance, it appears that, David had just got through saying, I know God's going to deliver me. He will deliver me. But then he says, I'm going to be destroyed by this guy. But perhaps what he's doing is he's saying to himself, if I don't do anything, Saul's going to kill me. I need to do something. And that's reasonable. I mean, to believe that God will deliver you and God will help us and be our aid and can do all things, but we still have a responsibility to act. It's not like we just sit back and wait. And I think that's what's going on in David's mind, that he believes God will deliver him, but he believes he has to do something to take action.
Okay. You brought up a great point, and you kind of answered the question that I had. Because on one hand, I look at this and I think, wait, David knows God's promise. David knows he's been anointed as the next king of Israel. He's seen God protect him already. Is this a lack of faith on David's part to go to where the Philistines are? Is this a brilliant strategic move, or is this a lack of faith? And I think you bring up a great point that, okay, I know the promise, but I got to do something. I've got to do what I can do to make that promise come true. And like Orlando said, where's the safest place to hide or stay away from Saul? Someplace that Saul won't follow me. I personally am convinced David doesn't think that God's abandoned him. I think he believes that God is still with him. David had 600 men with him. It's a lot of men. Saul had thousands looking for David. So David and his mighty men are vastly outnumbered. David has twice tried to convince Saul not to pursue him. Saul keeps going back to his hatred of David. What David does among the Philistines is going to give us a little bit of insight as to where his head and his heart are. Here's what the text says. Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
I forgot. I wanted to add just something real quick, that it would be as if David just went on as though everything was great, and he even went back, well, God's going to deliver me. I'll just go back to where Saul is. It's kind of like us saying, well, we know God's going to keep us safe and deliver, and then yet we do something dangerous. We're like putting God to the test. Yeah. And maybe that's part of David's heart. He's not, trying to put God to the test by doing something reckless and dangerous.
Okay. Now, I would argue that being in Philistine territory is dangerous, but David obviously decided it's not as dangerous as having Saul breathing down my neck. So I think you're right. Mike.
I think it's interesting that in both of these instances too, like David's highly outnumbered, he's being pursued, but both times he calls out to Saul, he's right there, and they don't go after him.
Yeah, you're right.
And they wait a couple weeks and then come back looking for him. Like they know where he is. Why don't they go after him then? Yeah. and the fact that they don't is interesting. But I think part of this is like David said, okay, the first time in the cave, he feels kind of remorseful, and the way that he approaches Saul is like, hey, and this time he's very humble, but he also, calls out all of his men and says, someone came to kill the king tonight. Like he says that. He didn't do it, but he said, and he's probably lucky that, that he didn't kill Abner while he was there.
Yeah.
But like, I think part of it is just like, as long as I'm here, we're going to keep doing this song and dance. So let's just go somewhere else and see what God has in store for us there.
Yeah, yeah. It's a strange decision David makes. And you guys know the story, I'm sure. Strange things happen because of that decision. Here's what the text says in chapter 27. So David and the 600 men with him left and went over to Achish, son of Maoch, king of Gath. Achish has met him before. He's the crazy guy. David and his men settled in Gath with Achish. Something has changed. David's not acting insane, and he now is settled in Gath. Each man had his family with him, and David had his 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, the widow of Nabal. When Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer searched for him. By the way, David has 600 men with him, but the text says those 600 men had families. So David now has 600 households with him. His wives are with him. But we're going to see later on in the text, there's a lot of wives and children traveling with David now as well. So his decisions aren't just now, it's not just me and a bunch of misfits. There's a lot of people that are going to be blessed or suffer because of my decisions. My thing is, why would they follow him to Gath? Oh, why in the world follow David to Gath? I said, let's leave David alone for a while. We're going to go our way. What do you think, Irene?
Well, not that, but I was thinking of the more basic stuff, like how does he feed all these people? That's what I'm thinking of. How do they feed all these guys? Where do they put them? And then they have families.
Yeah.
I mean, they need more than 10 farms or 20 farms to feed those guys. So where do they get the food?
You think of the food that shows up the first Sunday of every month, that mountain of food. Try feeding, 600 men with all families. Yeah. We never think about that stuff, do we? Yeah, I don't.
I think that there is no error, no mistake why David is attracting people to himself, why he is considered the way that he is, because he's a man of action. He is transparent in his attitude of being chosen as king. He doesn't take it for granted. And it seems that he tries to make his decisions pleasing to God. He's always conscious of that. So when he is doing these things, I don't think that he is doing it out of a sense of anything but just being who God chose. He is just doing David.
Yeah.
And that is honestly who he is.
Yeah, that's a great point. The takeaway for us is people respond to that. People see that. If you're trying to be a man after God's own heart and you're doing the right things for the right reasons, there's a lot of ways to influence people. There's a lot of ways to lead people. Consistently, David leads as a man after God's own heart. And people see that. People respond to that. Good point. Verse 5. Then David said to Achish, "If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be assigned to me in one of the country towns that I might live there. Why should your servants live in the royal city with you?" David says, "Hey, Achish, me and my family's here, well, all us, we don't really deserve to be here with you in the royal city. Just give us some place that we can kind of settle." So on that day, Achish gave him Ziklag, and it has belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. David lived in Philistine territory 1 year and 4 months. David has a plan, and he needs to be removed from the watchful eyes of King Achish and to be able to carry it out. Also, we could probably argue that David needed his own space because he wanted to worship God. He wanted to worship God as a Jewish man. We're not exactly sure how long David was actually in Gath. The text says a year and 4 months. Later on, the king says he's been with me for years. Did a little bit of research. There's some translation issues there. We know it's a long time. It wasn't weeks. He was there for a while, whether it was a year and 4 months or several years. By the way, a lot of things happen in Ziklag. While David is in Ziklag, a guy by the name of Uriah the Hittite shows up, and he joins David in Ziklag. And we assume, as does his wife, a lady by the name of Bathsheba, who are going to play a pretty big part in the David story later on. You can put that in your back pocket. Verse 8. Now David and his men went up and raided the Jeshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. From ancient times, these people had lived in the land extending to Shur in Egypt. Okay, who are these people that David and his men are raiding? They are the enemies of God. They were people that God had commanded from ancient times. God had commanded Joshua to drive these people from the land. And that's who David is going and raiding. Whenever David attacked an area, he did not leave a man or woman alive, but took sheep and cattle, donkeys and camels and clothes. Then he returned to Achish. Okay, we've got 3 minutes to just introduce the elephant in the room here. This is very troubling. What David is doing is from a kind of a guy position, it's like, wow, that is awesome, yeah. He's killing women, he's killing children. He's going to lie to King Achish. He's going to deceive King Achish. Matthew Henry said this: "We can acquit David of his cruelty and injustice because long ago these people were doomed by heaven for destruction." In other words, these are enemies of God. They deserve to die. Maybe that's the answer. It's still troubling to me. Verse 10. When Achish asked, "Where did you go raiding today?" David would say, "Against the Negev of Judah, against the Negev of Jeraheel, or against the Negev of the Canaanites," which were all Israelite territories. The king of Philistia, king of Gath, says, where'd you go raiding? I went against the Jews. I went against my old people. I'm raiding Jews. I'm killing Jews. When in fact, he was raiding and killing the enemies of God. By the way, the Kenites there that are mentioned, Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, was a Kenite. Jael, remember the tent peg wielding housewife? She was a Kenite. Verse 11, he did not leave a man or woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he thought they might inform on us and say, this is what David did. So why does he leave no witnesses behind? He didn't want anybody telling the king, wait, where did he say he went? No, he came and he was killing us. He was raiding our villages. And such was his practice as long as he lived in Philistine territory. Achish trusted David and said to himself, he has become so odious to his people, the Israelites, that he will be my servant forever. Achish says, man, his people have to hate him by now because he is attacking his own people. He's attacking the Israelites, which of course David was not. He was attacking the Israelite enemies. Again, the whole thing's a little bit troubling. Maybe it's not to you, it's troubling to me. Is David sinning when he is lying to King Achish? Is David sinning when he tells a lie to King Achish? Martha's nodding her head, yes. I think he is. What was the law of Moses? Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not lie, right? Is David putting others in harm's way with his deception? Again, I think he is, as we will soon see, by the way. David criticizes Saul. He criticized Nabal for returning evil for good. You know, I did good to you and you returned evil. Isn't that what he's doing to Achish? Isn't he returning evil for good? Achish has, been pretty nice to him. David is generally credited with writing Psalm 119. Psalm 119 verse 29 says, "Keep me from my deceitful ways." Is David not being deceitful right here? I don't know. Interestingly enough, Scripture records the events, but Scripture does not pass judgment on David. It just says, here's what happened. And, I guess we'll wonder. But yeah, I think David was sinning by deceiving Achish, by lying to Achish. It's never right to do the wrong thing. It's always right to do the right thing. It's never wrong to do the right thing. Whatever that saying is. To always do the right thing. And we're going to see here next week, the plot will thicken even more because some things happened to David and his guys that David never saw coming. He's going to learn some lessons. Hey, thanks for the comments. Great comments tonight. Appreciate your input. Let's go ahead and have a prayer, and we'll close. Father, we are thankful that you continue to show your grace and your love to us. And we are thankful that you recognize us as children of yours. And Father, as we've talked about tonight, as we look at this story of David, may we strive to have a heart that is like your heart. Forgive us of all the times when we fall short of that. And forgive us of all the times when we sell you short and what you might be able to do with us and through us. Father, we pray that you'd be with us as we continue this week. Help us to be more like Jesus in everything that we do and say. And I pray it in his name. Amen. Thank y'all.